Hello, and welcome to the Storied Human. I am so excited to share with you an interview I did with my friend Sandy Cohen. She is so cool. She has a podcast called Inner Peace to Go. She's working on her master's degree in public health, and she's very interested in exploring how we can have more peace with with science-backed methods. Like everything that she recommends, she's basing it on brain science or studies that she's read, research that she knows, and she's bringing this to her coaching practice, which I think is so cool. I love that she's so serious about it, and I love all the tips that I've already gotten from her because we were in a podcast class together, and I meet with her and one other amazing person, Patty Martin, who I've also interviewed. I've interviewed both of these women, and I just learned so much from them. So she was kind enough to interview me because I had done a workshop on regrets a while back, and I had some nice comments about it and feedback. I felt really good about moving on with it and sort of developing it, but I had sort of put it on the shelf temporarily. But Sandy wanted to explore it with me, and I was really glad that she did that because I need to get back into it and I wanted to work on it. And it was really nice to be able to just talk freely about it. So this episode is Sandy's interview of me on regret. Enjoy. It's hopefully helpful. It offers some tips about how we can handle regrets and how we can keep them. You can't get rid of them, but we can keep them at a volume we can handle. We can sort of manage them. So without further ado, here's me and Sandy Cohen.
Well, I am so excited to welcome my friend and colleague, Lynn Thompson. Thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. It's so cool you asked me to do this.
Well, I'm delighted. So I invited Lynn to come and talk today because Lynn held a workshop on regret, which I attended, and it was really, really illuminating. And Lynn is both a student and teacher in this area. So I think that, and I was just saying this to you before we started recording, that I think that regrets can stand in the way of our inner peace if it's something we end up like ruminating on, or it feels like sort of some unfinished business that gnaws at us. So what is regret and why do we keep going back to it?
That's the $25 million question. Regret is wishing you had done something different and not being able to really go back there and change it. And sometimes it's a sister or brother to grief. It often shows up with grief. So you might have worked through the grief, but there's this regret over how the person died, or whether you did enough for them, or whether you were able to be with them. Like my mother died very suddenly, like 21 years ago now, and I wasn't able to say goodbye or be with her. It was just one of those things. And it took me a while to realize that that was lingering. I think for some people, it's not just losing someone, it's how you lost them or getting past the suffering that they went through. If you know someone who had cancer and it was a tough end to their life. So there's regrets can be all tangled up in grief and loss, and we may not recognize it. And I think it's like also, it's just that sadness that sometimes we don't name. We're sad, or something triggers a memory of someone. It's often connected to a memory and you sort of beat yourself up over it. And I found myself doing that. I found myself sort of going to certain thoughts or memories and just feeling terrible, like that was going to help anybody. It's like,
Yeah, well, I know, but we so do that. Like we ruminate on things that make us feel horrible, and then we wonder why we feel so horrible. But you know what? As you're talking about grief and loss, it made me think that we could have regrets about how we handled things in relationships or in jobs, even. Like it doesn't even just have to be with like the actual mortal loss of a loved one, but how I was at my job and I could have maybe handled it differently. And why didn't I know better or something, or same with relationship, right?
I think that's so good. I think there's like a million things that could cause you to feel regret. And I wanted to talk about what the word actually, where it comes from, because I just laughed my head off when I found out, because because regret comes from the old French "gretter," which means to weep. So it's to re-weep. It's to weep over and over. And that's when I really had like a light bulb about what I was doing. Was I was going back to these situations, these memories, feeling terrible and sort of re-weeping. Like it doesn't make sense to be sad over and over. It wasn't getting me anywhere. And that's what spurred me to look more closely at how to, you can't get rid of regrets, right? You can turn the volume down though, and you can restore them, sort of like a memory, right? You don't want the memory to intrude. So you don't want the regret to get too big or loud. You can't excise it. But I also wanted to say, I think it's overactive, conscientious people really who have sometimes big time regrets, because a little bit of regret is good. Psychopaths have no regret.
Right. So if you're feeling this, you're not a psychopath. Right.
Right. Although I was thinking they may regret that certain evil schemes they tried didn't work,
that they weren't more evil.
But it's a healthy thing to feel bad, and it's conscientious to take a look at what mistakes did I make? What could I do differently? But to dwell on them is not good, is not healthy, right? So there's a little, like many things, right? There's a modicum of regret that is healthy and spurs you out of your guilt or your regret to do better next time or to work on it. But some of us get caught up in deep regret.
Well, and what you said about grief, especially since you defined it as to re-weep, it's like, okay, it's always going to be connected to some place, either where we lost or came up short or didn't have the results we had hoped or whatever. So it's always going to have that grieving element to it.
Yeah.
What have you found in your research are some ways that we can start to turn the volume down, as you said?
Yeah, it's a really good question too. The first thing you want to identify, I found it helpful, the two buckets to put the regrets into. So there are regrets you can do something about, like the person that you wronged or think you wronged is already still alive, or maybe out of touch, but on the earth, or, you can maybe do something about it. You can make amends, as they say in AA, that same typical make amends, find the person, talk about the situation, say you're sorry, try to make amends in some way. Those are easier, of course, than the regrets you can do nothing about because the person's gone, or, in my case, the animal's gone. I had uncovered these. I just was like, why am I so sad about losing my dog? I mean, I know I'm sad. I miss her, but what is it that's making me feel so bad? And it was really that at the end of her life, I felt like we didn't do enough and we didn't find another vet, and we could have, treated her. She had cancer and we didn't know it. And the vet didn't know it. And I just felt like endlessly sad because she was so important. I know you can relate to that.
Absolutely.
So there's regrets that you can't do anything about. So the ones that you can do something about, great. If you can stand it, get back in touch with the person, say what you need to say, get your courage up. I mean, it's very healing to approach those regrets that you can do something about. And sometimes, Sandy, the person doesn't even remember what you did as a really bad thing. Like, this is what happened to me. I went out to lunch with my friend Laura. I hadn't seen her in a while. We got back in touch. So we had like a break, I guess. And I got back in touch, and I'd always felt bad when we worked together like 30 years ago. I always felt bad that she wanted to go to Europe. We were talking about going to England. We worked together. We were having such a great time. And I said, she goes, let's go to England. And I said, that's a great idea, But at the same time, my dad was getting a divorce and moving to Georgia. My parents were divorcing, and I really missed my dad. And he said, hey, this summer, do you want to, you'd only been there like 7 months. Do you want to come down and go on a trip with, me and your stepmother? And my father had a step grandson at the time who was 12. And I just thought, that would be really fun. I was like 32. So I said, yeah. So then I told her, I can't afford both trips. And she was really like sad because I had told her I would, but I had told her I would the way you do sometimes, like, yeah, that'd be great.
Right. You hadn't like bought the airline tickets and stuff.
But still, I think maybe I was a little flighty, I don't know. I've always felt bad about it. I still feel bad about it, right? A little bit, like it's not one of my big regrets, but it came up at lunch and I said, I want to apologize for something. I just have always felt a little bad that I never went to England with you. And she goes, what? She said, I don't remember
why would
that.
you have gone to England with me? Like,
she remembers everything. And I just thought, what a beautiful lesson for me. Like, would I carry that? What if I hadn't, like, what if we weren't back in touch, and I would just carry that with me forward as one of my, my satchel of regrets when she didn't even remember it. So you have to remember that not everybody sees things the way you do, you know?
Very
And
powerful.
I am like a drama queen for sure. So I think sometimes I overdo this. Oh my gosh, the agony of regret. So she really like healed me a little bit that day and made me feel so much better and laugh at myself
Yeah.
that I was doing this. And, I want to tell people you might be doing that too. Like this might be in your head or it is a regret, but the person doesn't think it's that big of a deal.
Right. Right. So let's unearth it and put it back out in the open so they can be like, dude, no worries or whatever.
I love that. And I love the feeling of that. So that was a good lesson for me. So those, regrets you can fix, definitely try to. And then we get to the harder regrets, the regrets that you maybe can't like literally fix. You can make them better, but you can't like redo the situation or find the person for whatever reason. So for those, you have to forgive yourself. That's the very first thing you have to do. You have to forgive yourself. And we both know how that happens, right? You have to talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love, a friend. Well, I said to myself when I was going through this training for myself, I said, what would you say to a good friend? And I would say to that friend, you were going through a tough time then. You did the best you could. You didn't see the whole situation. You're just human. I would just say, you're just human. You got to give yourself a break. You can't keep worrying about this because you're just a human being. And so I said, well, why can't I say that to myself, for heaven's sakes, because you need to love yourself the way you love your friends. You give your friends a break. I know a lot of women like that. They don't give themselves a break, you
I
know?
think this is a huge issue. I mean, even when you said the first thing you got to do is forgive yourself, I could just hear like part of myself and maybe the listeners going, well, there goes that because that ain't going to happen, because it's like so hard to do. And I don't really know why it's so hard to do, but I know that it is. And maybe it is that self-love piece, or we think like, well, I should do better than that. And like my standards are higher than that. And so
Right.
therefore, like I don't deserve forgiveness. But of course, what you said is absolutely true. Like the way we would to a friend, if a friend is going through a hard time, if I would have known you at the time of your dog's passing, right? And would have said, like, oh my God, Lynn, you guys obviously love that dog. And, like you were doing everything you could. Like it's easy for me to summon that for you. I think it's harder for us to summon that for
Yeah.
ourselves.
And this is really reminding me of our conversation, full disclosure, we talk every week on our pod squad meeting with Patty Martin, and we talked about perfection and what that does to us. So I think this is tied in like, well, I can forgive them, but I have to be perfect.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
holding myself to this higher standard and I expect more from myself. But like I said, perfection is unattainable. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Not forgiving ourselves. And, I feel like saying to some people, some of my friends are still doing that. And you just want to say, well, you can come here and down here with the rest of us and join the human race because you are human. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. So I
Yeah. But
think that gets in our way. Yeah.
oh, I think so too. But it's so important because, too, if we're talking about regret as like something that we want to put, I mean, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, like put in its place, like we don't want it to run our emotions and like
I love
now
that.
we're,
Put it in its place. Yeah.
yeah. So if we want to put it in its place, then it requires us taking this step of self-compassion, of saying you did the best you could. Certainly you did the best you could at the time. You weren't trying to like screw up or do things that now you later regret. I mean, you were trying to do right.
I love
So
that. Yes.
so that's an incentive. Like even if we think, oh, I don't deserve forgiveness or I don't want to do it or whatever, to remember that we're talking about how to make peace with sometimes uncomfortable and painful feelings of regret. Like, and this is just a step in that direction.
I think that's really good. And you can't know everything. Like I always feel like I have to know everything. And I know more about my dog's operation and what, or her treatment or what should have happened now. But like back then we didn't, what really helped me with this so much? I have a friend who has an animal boarding business. I interviewed her on the podcast. Her name's Christina, and she's such a wonderful person. You know what she said to me? She said, vets struggle with that all the time. It's very hard to diagnose in female dogs, very hard to tell. And it just made me feel so much better. It's like, well, if the vet couldn't tell,
Right, right. How am I as a layperson going to tell? And you know what that makes me think of too? Like when I think about doctors and science, I mean, science is always evolving. What we know now is different from what we knew, 100 years ago and even 50 years ago and even 20 years ago. So like we're always kind of doing the best we can with what we've got. And
Yeah.
and that's like a universal thing among our human species. So let's give ourselves a break, especially if we don't want to be beset with regret to the point that we have no emotional peace.
Right. And I think it can really, it can paralyze you. I can imagine, like I wasn't at that point, but I could see it. I could see like if I don't do something with this kind of useless returning to these sad places in my memory, I'm not going to move forward. It's going to hold, it's literally like a bunch of baggage that you can almost feel the weight of. So one of the things I suggest, and I know that forgive yourself is hard, but there's another component to things you can do about regrets that, you can't fix with the people in the present,
Mm-hmm.
is you can transform the regret by saying, well, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to learn from this. What did I learn? Or what do I think I could have done differently? And I'm going to do it differently. You're either going to do it differently from now forward, or if someone's going to, in this situation, I'm going to share with them what I learned. And I'm going to make this better by transforming it into a pay it forward kind of thing. And so that will make you feel better because you don't, you can do something with it.
Yeah. And it's meaning making. I was just talking with a physician. She's a psychiatrist that I was interviewing. And we were talking about the importance of meaning making and connecting like things that feel painful or like, what on earth, like connecting it to something that is meaningful, whatever that looks like for you in the scope of your understanding, in the scope of your spirituality or whatever. And this is one way to make that regret have meaning and value beyond just like, I beat myself up over it and I feel terrible about it.
Right. I think that's wonderful. I think that helps. You see on the news, if somebody has a terrible tragedy, they lose maybe their son or daughter very early, they turn it into something that helps people.
They
Like they
start a
either start
foundation, they become an
a
activist
fund
or
or they,
yeah.
yeah. And to me, that's just such a beautiful human thing. And it connects you. It connects you to what it is to be human, to reach out and hold on to each other and say, look, this happened to me and I want to not have it happen to you. And let's work on something positive. Like, let's work on making this better,
What else can we do once we've worked on forgiving ourselves and try to, see what meaning we can make of it or use it to help others? Are there other steps we should take to put the regret in its place?
Yeah. If you find the thoughts are still floating up, and I did, you can catch them and do like a retraining. You can replace the thought eventually. It's like a common technique where you sort of, I mean, some people even put like a rubber band around their wrist and they snap it, right? It's
When
an
they
old
notice.
technique, but it's really good because you associate, oh, that's not supposed to be happening. Let's pause, right? And I did this and it's really useful where you get that thought like, oh, I'm getting sad again. I'm thinking about that thing. And then you just say, what, and you replace it with that positive spin, like, okay, like for me, I really felt sad that I wasn't with my mom. And I just really felt bad that I couldn't, say goodbye. So this is what I said to myself. I said, your mother knew you loved her. Like she knew, right? And now she doesn't need you to feel sad because she's not needing that from you. She doesn't want you to feel sad, but she knew that you loved her. And what you can do to feel better is if one of your friends, and this is, I'm sort of repeating myself, but if one of your friends is uncomfortable or doesn't know what to do, say, go, if you're allowed to be with your parent, go be with them.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have this regret if it's possible for you to be with them. But I got off the subject. The thought that comes, you need to retrain your thought. You need to replace it with a more positive thought. So if the thought comes up, take a moment, take a breath, and say the new thought 3 times. Take a really deep breath and say the new thought 3 times. And it could be really simple, but you're putting that new thought. You're creating that habit of, I'm not going to have this old thought anymore. I'm going to have this new thought. I did the best I could,
I
or
did the
I'm
best
not.
I could, or like this time is behind me now, or something like
Yeah.
that. Like it doesn't even have to be, I mean, I'm leaping here. You'll tell me if this is
No,
wrong.
that's
Like,
excellent. You could
oh,
be
okay. So it
keep it
doesn't have
really
to
simple.
be like,
Right.
okay, I'm fine with this. Like you don't have to say a thought that you don't even believe. You can
No.
say like, there's nothing I can do about it now, and I'm doing my best going forward, or
Yeah. Oh,
something
that's
like that.
exactly right. Um, so how do we let go of them? I had a section in the workshop that says accept any fault that you actually have fully. I didn't talk about that, but maybe you did do something wrong. Like you're maybe over re-weeping, but you did do something wrong. Accept the fault fully. And if you own it, then you can let it go, or you can put it in its place. Um, and again, it's just a series of habits, like retraining yourself not to have those things. There's also a ritual you can do, which I love. It's kind of like based on the burning bowl. If you've ever heard of those, the Unitarian Church in particular, they do like a burning bowl ceremony at New Year's, where you write out your hopes for the new year on a little piece of paper, or you can do an eraser of negative. You can
Things
write
you're ready to let
things
go of, like.
things I'd really like to burn up. Yeah, like let go of, and put them in the bowl and burn them. And I did a small version of that with friends several years ago. It was super powerful. It's just, and I was trying to figure out like what is it about it, and it's just that human beings need um actions. They need to get together and they need to do actions as they say what they want, or as they're thinking what they want. The ritual reinforces that. It's why it's so old. It's why rituals work, because human beings are moving through something. They're actually, going through a set of movements with other human beings, and it's super powerful. It's much different from just sitting and praying or hoping or thinking. It's a nice addition. So what you do is you just get like a little votive candle and put it on a little plate, or you can get like one of those really cute can't like jar candles,
Mhm.
and take some strips of paper and write out the regrets. And then with a lot of, like they say, intention, right? Take it as you're writing it, really think about it. You might even want to say it out loud if you're alone, and just write it, and just say, like I would write, I wish I had been able to do more for my dog, and then for my Chrissy, and I would take the piece of paper and I would think and really intentionally put it in the fire, and know that it was going to go, not away, but it was going to really be lessened in my mind.
Like transmute.
Exactly. I was going to take away the bulk of it.
Yeah.
It was going to go away, and it's going to burn up. And it's just really good to have that sign that your regret has been burned up. You'll
Yeah.
feel better. I felt really much better. Even demonstrating it for the workshop, I felt better.
Well, and it gives you that kind of like, well, like you said, ritual, like a ritual of closure or release, or it's like, I'm not just like, it's not, it makes it tangible. This is not just happening in my head and
Right.
heart with like emotions and
Yeah.
distress. This is like something it's physical. Here's the paper, here's the fire, you
Yeah.
know,
And you know how they say, like, your brain doesn't know the different, your brain says, okay, this is going to change this.
this is going to help.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
brain sees it burn up. Okay, it's burned up. Like your brain doesn't really know, right?
Right.
I'd like to know more about that. I bet you could tell me more, or we could find out more about how
Well,
the brain reacts to ritual.
I wonder if some of it doesn't have to do with placebo effect, where
Ah,
if we
yes.
believe something, I mean, and there's a ton of science behind this. This is why, like, people who are developing new medications have to prove it works better than a placebo. Because if you give
Yeah.
me like a Tic Tac and you tell me this is going to calm your anxiety or this is going to help you sleep better tonight, I'm quite likely to report, oh, that totally worked. It really helped me sleep better. I love that new medicine. And you're like, it was a Tic Tac. So, so I wonder if ritual doesn't, not in the exact same way, but like we expect and see this as a way to release this, tension or regret or whatever, so that when we do it, we expect that to be the result. And then we experience that result.
Yeah. I love that. And they say, like, if self-healing was impossible, there would be no placebo effect. So you're literally setting yourself up for self-healing.
Well, and it's absolutely true, at least as it relates to medications. I mean, because I know like with antidepressant medications, the antidepressants are only a little bit better than a placebo. So if you literally give someone a Tic Tac and you're like, this will improve your mood,
Yeah.
that like a lot of the time it works, just as well as like if you gave them a Zoloft or something. So
I'm like little Miss Placebo. Like if anybody, I had to stop telling people to take certain supplements or raving about them. Like I take certain supplements that do a lot for me. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying things work for me, right? It might not work for other.
well, because we believe it.
I really believe it. Yeah. And so I never really thought about it. Like somebody said to me, "Oh, I have a headache." And I said, did you take something? Did you take some pain reliever?" And they said, "Yeah, but I still have a headache." And I'm like, "What?"
You're like, no, you don't.
I had no idea. Literally, I think I was in my 20s. I had no idea that people could take a pain reliever and not have their pain go away. Like
Isn't
I
that
remember being
interesting?
like, "Oh my God, that exists." It's like,
That's so interesting. So yeah, I wonder if that isn't part of the ritual. And especially if you like with this regret releasing ritual that we're talking about, if you are conducting the ritual for yourself or for your family, whoever's with you, in such a way that you're like, we're releasing this regret. Like that's what this is about. This isn't an accident. We're not just like, you know, we had a
yeah,
candle going and we just put something in it. No, this is like
right.
an
There
like
has
you
to be
said,
that
intention.
intention. There has to be that intention. You have to get into like a prayerful or meditative state. Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about is the placebo effect. You're right. That's so cool. But I know it really helped me. If nothing else, it gives you something to do about it.
Yes, because so often we feel helpless because we're like, okay, I can't go back in time. This person or this being is no longer here. I can't fix it. What can I do? But you know what? Even as I was just saying that, I'm thinking, what you can do is you heal yourself. You bring your better self forward. Like that's one thing you can do. Like even the beings, like when I'm thinking of your dog, Chrissy, like I mean, I know a dog is not a person and stuff, but feels like it. But anyway,
Some of them really do. Yeah.
but the spirit of Chrissy would not want you to forever suffer. The spirit of Chrissy is one that loves you. And so it would want you to go forth thriving. It wouldn't want you to be like forever downtrodden with regret. So maybe one of the things we can do in addition to the ritual is to go forward with like, I'm not saying total joy, but at least to go forward like with optimism and light.
Yeah. And I think by finding those positive things that you can do out of what you've learned, you can really help that process. Because I felt better just saying it to myself. Well, I'm not going to let anyone worry about their dog and not investigate maybe that it could be this, or I'm not going to let anyone doubt that they need to be with their parent if they can. I'm going to always represent that. Not that I, you know, really know what's good for anyone, but I'm going to, if I get a chance, encourage a friend to do what maybe I wasn't able to do. I remember saying to somebody, you don't want to have regrets. I remember saying that. I think I said it to my brother because he said, "Oh, I don't know if I can get down there and, see dad." And I was like, "Yeah, but you don't want to have regrets."
Yeah, but see, that's
Because,
valuable. That's giving wisdom from your heart.
and so you can really turn it into something like that, which is so much better than walking around like, sometimes I feel like I'm Eeyore, it's walk around like, dur, 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 it's like, and I'm just comfortable being sad over things. Yeah, and I uncovered that for me, it's like my focus on the past. It's like linked with I'm just too much in the past, too much in those memories. And I'd even go out on a limb and say that's what writers tend to do because we remember a lot
Mhm.
and we write from our memory. And maybe we live there a little too much. So it kind of like wakes you up. Like you can't be living in your regrets or your past, right? Memories are fine, but they have they're again, we're always talking about this balance that we're striving for.
Mhm. What did doing this research and doing this workshop, how did that change the way, like, did it change anything about your behaviors going forward? Did it change anything about your understanding of, what other people are experiencing? Like, what were sort of the broader implications of doing this work?
I think I was pretty compassionate before and I was always trying to like support people, but this made me more likely to speak up. more likely to speak up. I wasn't afraid to speak up. And I could come from that place of, I had that sort of, I've been there, I had this experience. And I find that you really need to be kinder to yourself. And I got to tell you, I felt lighter after I did this. I just felt lighter. And there is a heaviness to regret and to hanging on to the past. We all talk about baggage, emotional baggage, you can almost feel it physically, you
Yes.
know?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. You were able to have that release. And then, for those of us who were able to be in the workshop, like you so generously offered that experience to us that we could
It was
learn
so
this, that
fun to
we could,
share. Yeah.
and so but that's really powerful. That's another way of transforming regret, right? Like not only did
Yeah.
you tell your brother to like be there for dad and, tell your friends about the dog, but you like conducted this workshop for us, your other friends, to get to just learn this and not knowing what our regrets might be, but just saying, hey, here's a process that could be really helpful. So I thank you
You were
for that.
also kind about, it was my first regrets workshop, and you were also kind about attending, and it really did feel good to share it. I mean, my whole thing is, why go through something if you can't share it? Like, what's the point, of going through it, feeling bad, learning whatever you went through if you can't share it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I know that you're going to touch so many listeners with this conversation today because everyone's got stuff they regret. And if it's weighing on you, this is like proven strategies to help lighten that load.
Yeah.
So I thank
And
you so much for that.
you're welcome. And I changed the title because when I looked more at this and did a little more brushing up before we talked, the title was Letting Go of Regrets, but I realized it's just, turning down the volume.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going away, but they've got too much volume in your head.
Well, and it sounds like you make kind of a peace with it, just like almost like a scar. Like, okay, that was where I ate it off my bike, and now I've got that little scar here, but it
Oh, I
doesn't hurt
love that.
anymore,
Yes.
but I could
Yes.
see it.
And to me, that's so much more healthy to be accepting. Like, it's all part of you. It's all part of you. You don't just like throw away parts of you,
Right.
but you balance and make that harmony.
And it's like you metabolize it and then it can become something else. Then it
Yeah.
can become like the workshop that you offer to your friends or advice that you give to a loved one.
Yeah. I love the scar analogy. I love that. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
thanks.
really good. It's always good talking to you.
It's great talking to you. So I want you to please, before we close, I want to say that Lynn is also the host of a podcast where she so beautifully extracts fascinating stories from people. So do you want to talk about the Storied Human?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah, almost a year I've had it. February 14th will be a year. And I don't think I ever would have stuck with it without the podcast class and all the beautiful women like you and Patty that I met. It's just been a journey. And I just love that people share so much, that I get to hear about how people overcame things. And I've had so many interesting entrepreneurs on and people talking about mental health. So it's just a great place to share. If anybody has a story, I'm always open for a story.
Well, thank you. And then please tell listeners where they can find you. And don't be surprised if you get like demand for you to rehost that workshop if people want to be led by you through this experience. But how can folks get in touch with you?
That would be lovely. I'm on Instagram at L Thompson, capital L, capital T, L Thompson _574. I didn't change it because I've had that for a while and I just know people know it. And I'm on email, thestoriedhuman@gmail.com. And The Storied Human is on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Terrific. And I'll link to all of it in the show notes so folks can
Thank
keep
you.
up with you. And thank you so much, Lynn. It's always wonderful talking with you. And I really loved unpacking regrets with you. So thank you.
It's wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.